All right, guys, welcome to podcast number 3 of the BizBeatdown Podcast with both Patrick Barbour and myself. Today we have a special guest. His name is Jayce Grayye. Jayce, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for coming in and joining us. So, Jayce, I know I'm aware of what you're in, but why don't you just let the guests know or let the audience know as far as what you do, your business, how long you've been in business, and what you guys focus on.
Yeah, no, definitely appreciate that, Vincent and Patrick. So I run a sales recruiting agency called Jayce Grayye Consulting and Recruiting. We're coming up on the 3-year mark in January. And again, we just focus on finding a high-level sales talent for organizations. When I first started this thing about 3 years ago, it really wasn't one of these things where I was like, hey, let me go ahead and start a recruitment agency. It just happened by accident, right? I had a network of clients where they're like, hey, can you help me find a salesperson because you're an amazing salesperson? And I said, you know what, let me give it a try. And I said, I'm not going to charge you anything. Let me just see if I could do it. And if I can, then let me see how else I could help you and better serve you. And 3 years later, 350 people that we've placed later, we're still doing it. So, it's sometimes it's those things in your life where accidents happen for the right reasons, and you just kind of roll with it. Right. And thankfully we've grown the team out. We've cut the team down. We've grown the efficiencies. We've grown the team out again. Right. You kind of learn through trial and error, but I've never really ever thought about building a recruitment business as a kid. I always thought I was going to be a baseball player because I was always a college athlete, played sports my whole life as a kid. And I think that those traits, those sort of things that came over from playing sports actually correlated very well into my sales arena and then eventually into this whole sales recruiting company.
That's awesome, man. And go ahead, Patrick.
No, I was just going to say, this is my first time meeting Jayce, and so that's awesome. Jayce, out of curiosity, sorry to jump in. Was your background prior in sales? Were you a salesperson? Is that kind of...
Okay. Yeah. So to provide more context, I started my career in sales selling cars, right? Did that for about, a few years. And for the most part, when I was there, I think the hardest thing for me to accept was like, this is the best it's ever going to be. You're working like 60, 70 hours a week, getting one day off. You're basically barely making scraps to get by the month. And you're realizing, man, there's better things to life than doing this. Mind you, I was like 20 at the time, and I was 23 by the time I left. And I said, you know what? Let me go into another venture. And thankfully, that's when I got into vacation sales. I learned the significance of like buys versus needs versus wants. And I think that opened me to like the flood where it's like, wow, I could actually be making 10,000 a grand a month. Like, it's actually possible. My work ethic was never the issue. It was really the opportunity. And I did that for a year and a half. And then I switched over to healthcare, and man, I learned so much about emotional intelligence. And I was, again, through these like certain like periods of my life, what I'm really trying to gain out of it is like the experience that I'm lacking. And I'm looking at areas, where do I need to improve? So my whole focus was like, what do I need? What can I improve? And then how can I always like better myself? And as I went through these phases of like, let me do this, let me do this, let me do this, let me do that, I ended up working for GC Cardone, and that ultimately opened the playing field for me to really understand business to business sales, right, at a higher level. And I was super grateful for that experience. But by the time you kind of leave there, you kind of feel like there's like this chip on your shoulder where you're like, okay, I know I could do this now for myself. I just need to prove it to myself now, right? And that's how all of a sudden everything started flowing for me. But I'm gonna tell you this right now, it wasn't easy. I had the first
Shocking. You're joking. No way.
You know what, man? It was interesting. The first guy that, I was at that time, like deciding, let me partner up with someone who could help me with the ropes. It turns out that guy ended up being a scammer. Right. So for first step I take, already in the wrong.
Welcome to the real world. Yeah.
Welcome to the real world. And the thing is, it didn't happen until 3 months later. So it's like, oh, we made 50,000 the first month. We made 80,000 the second month. Month 3, nothing's happening because our orders are not being fulfilled. What is going on? The person who has to handle it can't handle it. And next thing you know, I'm in a hole for like 50 grand. And I got every sale I make now has to be paying off that debt. Right. Awesome. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to tarnish my reputation on my first merry-go-round here in this world. So I'm like, not me. I'm going to go make sure everybody's paid off. I don't care if I have to eat noodles for breakfast or every 2 days. I don't care. Or getting that squared away. And thankfully, that guy ended up leaving. I ended up, recreating the whole structure. And then from that point on, I said, okay, we're going to make sure everything's being done right. And when you're kind of starting off as an entrepreneur, you don't really know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. I think for the most part, you're just trying to figure it out. And that was me for the first year. I was like, I'm just trying to figure this shit out. I have a good network. I'm relying on my network. And then year 2 and year 3, you kind of start implementing the things that you need to start implementing in order to successfully grow the business, right? And I see why most businesses fail. I see it. It's like, you have to commit. You really have to commit to building everything out the way it's supposed to build out. Or else you're going to get screwed. Because think about it. In the last 3 years, we've went through a pandemic, the Great Recession, went through another pandemic, and now we're going through the recession.
Yep.
No doubt.
It's like,
and now there's a couple wars sprinkled in there, and absolutely.
Right. So if I could get through this, man, I could definitely get through anything. This is just like any business. You're building the foundation at the perfect timing, if anything. So it's been a very grateful experience, to say the least.
That's awesome. And for you, like when you were like, and I don't know how much detail you want to go into about this, but I think when you were kind of like on the come up, and I think, and my understanding is this is probably when you were getting better advice, is you had a heavy dose of like somebody that knew a good amount about marketing, right? And was a good marketing influence and kind of helped you with that. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was just connected with the right people. And one of my clients at the time, which is really funny. It turns out he only lived about a couple blocks away from me. And I would actually walk my dog every morning at the same park. He would just do his own meditation. And, it's funny because we're about the same age. And first time we meet, he's just there relaxing. I'm walking my dog and I'm like, is that him? I'm like, and I'm like getting closer. I'm like, oh shit, what's up? And what's crazy about it is that at the time I didn't know, this person was going to have such a strong influence in my life as far as like being so much of a coach when it comes to me learning marketing. But when you are surrounded by it's like very similar to like when you surround yourself by a true person that's a true salesman, you kind of know this person is a true salesman because they're just like, like you can learn so much from that person. It's the same thing for marketing. It's the same thing for copywriting. It's the same thing for graphic design. And that's where I said, you know what? I got to find this, I got to create my own cult of people who specialize in other skills that I don't specialize, and start picking their brains and start picking how they, and start thinking how they think. And that's what allowed me to really understand marketing and these other areas of it, because I said, okay, well, if he thinks like this, why does he think like this? How did he get to that point? And then as I started realizing those components of how he thought, how his process thoughts were, it started made me think the same way. And eventually that started elevating my marketing skills. And that's what ends up happening, right? You surround yourself with those who, right, are within your crowd. And that's what ended up happening in that case of scenarios.
Yeah, no, and I definitely agree with all that, because I mean, I know that when you and I started talking, there were a couple of things that I think with each person that you talk to, like especially that you can learn something from, you start to see the holes within your own business or the area that you can improve. And one of the main things that when you and I started talking, and I was telling Patrick about this, that I was learning from you, is about diversifying my business development outreach and kind of the method in which I was going about it. And I talked about this kind of on our last podcast or whatever. And I was like, I'm so reliant right now on email marketing. I need to learn how to go different paths. And so you have that going on right now where you kind of I think you have a pretty good SEO kind of system going on. At least that's something that it seems like you're always working on. You have a good amount of marketing. I think you're doing cold email marketing, doing some cold calling as well. What exactly does I guess, if you could kind of, because Patrick doesn't know really at all either, what is kind of your business development method right now, whatever you're willing, open to sharing.
Yeah. So we have organic, and then we have paid traffic. The paid traffic, we're just, again, think about it like a hedge fund, right? This is the best way I could explain it. Think about marketing as a hedge fund, right? The short-term gain is going to come from the paid traffic, and the long-term gain is going to be coming from the organic. But whatever you get from the short-term gain, you have to be investing about 70% of it back into the long-term, right, for that gain. So when I first started, I didn't have paid traffic. I had a pretty good skill set. I had cold calling, cold emailing, right? and I understood SEO. One of the most important things that I learned right before I started this business was I went on a business tour across the nation. I was one of the speakers, and I got connected with Obama's PR guy. And what he told me was, you got to be able, like, and this is just like, again, this was like off the records. He's like, you got to understand that when someone looks you up, you need to be able to let that sell for you, right? It's like if you see an athlete come in the door, let's just use LeBron James for example, right? If you see LeBron James coming through the door, he doesn't have to say anything for people to know it's LeBron James, right? So when somebody looks you up, and this is called passing the eye test, and you have everything going for you, you got your PR, you got your Google reviews, right? You got your media outlets, you got everything going for you. It becomes that much easier for your services or your work to sell themselves, right? So that's one thing he taught me. And I remember that because I said, when I started building out this whole business development side of the, right, I started thinking about with the end in mind. So what does that look like? SEO, PR, Google reviews, right? Like testimonials. What do I need to do to go ahead and enforce that and then build a brand on a platform? So I invested into a branding coach. She helped me solidify myself on LinkedIn, which that's how we're also connected there. And from that, I started looking at what other avenues I needed to implement in order for me to grow my business development. So we're talking so far, when we're looking at creating a business development partner, we're talking about cold calling, SEO, cold emailing, blogs, PR, and then so that's just that angle. But how do we go ahead and grow and double down in those departments? Well, LinkedIn offers newsletters, right? Newsletters is a form of blog that is both on Bing and on Google. So if you double down on that, then all of a sudden you're getting more awareness. Well, if you start creating a brand on LinkedIn, guess what tends to happen? More people start connecting with you, more people start reaching out to you. And then we start hosting audio rooms. So every single Wednesday, we host an audio room called the Cold Calling Edge with my partner, Mike Jill. And every single week, all we're doing is we're cultivating a community of buyers, right? But before we buy them, we need to keep teaching them. So on top of that, we're recording everything. And we have like over 20 recording sessions that we're optimizing for SEO. So when I'm looking into, hey, what am I doing here? I just gave you like 9 channels of lead generation, not including referrals, not including networking, that just requires you to go ahead and have. And then there's ways to circumvent that system to be able to scale it, which I'm testing that theory right now as we speak. So if it does work the way it's supposed to, and my theory is spot on, which in theory it should be, then I'll be able to grab any company in SEO and be able to circumvent the time of performance between 6 to 12 months to possibly 3 months based upon what I'm already doing, based upon what I already know. So I think that's also another component when it comes to business. Like you see so many business owners like being able to scale from like 0 to like 250,000, like people that we know, but they know so much in something that we don't know, right? And that's the information we're trying to get there. Is like, how do we find this information? Well, I'm right now, since I don't have anybody to go to for this, I just have to keep constantly experimenting. But I'll tell you this, I don't try to do this during Q4. Q4 is the time of the year where you should double down on everything that works, because you will get screwed by Santa Claus or Thanksgiving or the pilgrims.
Totally. That's actually a great segue. But before, because I wanted to ask you, what does your year end look like? What's your forecast for next year? But before we jump into that, paid traffic, you mentioned that kind of at the top of what you're breaking down there in terms of marketing strategy. That obviously caught my attention. That's something that I've been testing with this year. Out of curiosity, if you don't mind sharing, what channels are you? Is it ads on different platforms? Is it Google search? I know SEO is obviously a staple for you, but if you don't mind sharing a little flavor of that.
Yeah. So again, we've tested out Google, we've tested out Facebook, we've tested out IG. We haven't tested out YouTube, which is part of Google, but Google right now, it doesn't make sense based upon what we were seeing, right? What we were seeing.
You're talking about Google search? Is that what
Google Ads?
Yeah. Okay.
Google Ads. Yeah. So on Google Ads, it just didn't make sense to us because we dropped a good amount of money in there and we just did not see the returns. But we actually saw better returns on Facebook. That's a platform that we saw probably the best returns, where our cost for a lead made a lot of sense. Because like right now, an appointment for us is costing us less than $50.
Oh, that was going to be my next question, because that's the cat that you have to skin on the paid ads is this make business sense financially?
Yeah. So like there's ways around paid ads. And again, I'm super grateful to learn this from some of the genius marketers that I've met, but you can also, like, again, I'll paint to you this picture, right? Let's say we have a list of 20,000 companies that are hiring. We put that list into a retargeting ad. That retargeting ad is probably going to spend a lot less money than an ad that's trying to gather that and optimize, because it has data that we're leveraging. Now, all of a sudden, we're retargeting that ad for probably 1/3 of the price that we would be spending on, and we're probably could keep it running for a longer period of time in order for us to be able to generate more leads. So when it comes to paid ads, you got to understand, like, there's multiple ways of running paid ads, right? There's sponsored ads, but then there's retargeting ads, and the retargeting ads is a nice component where someone like me who likes to run it for a long period of time, let's say SEO, where we're getting our best bang for our buck, that becomes another way to generate leads for a lower cost of acquisition or cost per lead.
That's kind of one of the things. I don't know if I didn't hear you mention ads on LinkedIn, paid advertising.
I tried ads on LinkedIn. It was a waste of time.
Yeah, the cost of acquisition is just too high. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I spent the most amount of platform on that money. The cost for a lead there was around $453, and
I was at like $600. I was like,
yeah. And the best I ever got was $99 for a lead. The best I ever got, but that wasn't
terrible.
No, that only lasted 3 months, and then all of a sudden everything started changing. But the thing about LinkedIn, even though it is a professional network, and I love the platform, I use LinkedIn more for content, long form, organic, because it never fails. Every single week, I'm getting 3 leads from LinkedIn. Every single week, I'm getting 3 to 5 leads from my SEO. Every single week, we're getting about 5 to maybe 10 appointments from cold calling. And then on top of that, when you put all that in the mix, you're like, okay, all these lead channels, not even cold email, I've left that out, where I'm already at about over 12 appointments in a week of sales calls. Yeah. So if you do it right and you're getting a very low cost and you're generating the sales, then guess what? Then you take that money and you spend it on paid traffic, because you're going to need to do it in order to create more of a predictable system, right? And that's ultimately what you want to do, is create a predictable system, so then you can start optimizing your business a little better.
Love it. If you don't mind, give us a flavor. What are you seeing in your business right now as we, head towards the end of 2023? What's on your radar for launching next year? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, so I'm working on a project right now that I'm keeping that under wraps until we launch it. But for the most part, business right now is as strong as ever. I'm talking to other companies who are kind of seeing things slowing down, but I keep testing that out, because I keep believing that the reason it's probably not being as fruitful as it is for you that it is for me is because you don't have enough lead channels, right? You probably, and I keep saying this, like, I've been beating the community that I'm with, I've been beating their heads over with a stick for the longest. I'm like, do your newsletters, do your SEO, because guess what? Q4, because I did this last year, I split tested this last year. I knew this. Last year was the first year where I said, I'm going to do one audio room every single day, Monday through Friday, and I'm going to see what results come out of it for 3 months. So I did that for 3 months straight, and I did it in October to December. Guess what happened? January came around, we started getting flooded with leads. February came around, it got a little slow. March came around, it's staying good. And then April came around and we got flooded again. So during this time, people are going to take off time and they're going to be on their phones. They're going to want to listen to something. They're going to want to read something. And I promise you, if you don't catch their attention, then someone else will. And then you're going to be wondering why you're not making those sales. So you got to just keep doubling down on things that are working.
And how about 2024? What's your outlook there in terms of market, business? Obviously, there's some things going on economically, politically, globally. What's your read on next year? What that's going to look like?
You know what? It just depends in the industry. But to provide more context, like, I'm a firm believer that if something is happening in certain industries where it's turmoil, like I'll paint the picture in finance right now, right? We're seeing what's happening, and it's probably in turmoil. We don't know what's going to happen. Crypto, that's another one. We don't know what's going to happen, right? We just saw Sam Bankman get charged with guilty as of yesterday or someone like that. So when you look at certain industries, there's so much chaos happening inside of them. But as entrepreneurs, we have the autonomy to pick what industries we could better serve and you could pick an adjacent industry. And that's why I always say, like, I think niching down is great and all, but it also comes with its Achilles heels. If you really, really look at the companies who niche down too much, they end up realizing, damn, we got screwed because pharma companies are holding back because of VC. Damn, we got screwed because software companies are holding back because of VC. So you look at those things and you're like, okay, what industries are actually going to be crushing it? I look at those industries and I look at where the adjacent industries and I say, okay, great. So our plan of action for those ICPs will be to deliver the same message that we're doing. And we already have clients in those fields. So even though we're predicted to officially call recession, probably when this bimbo leaves the office, then it's not going to matter for guys like me, because I'm already proactively planning what I'm going to be doing next year. Like, I already know by that time I'm going to be adding another 2 to 3 more channels of lead generation. And also, like, I had a call with Vince back in August. He heard how, like, I think it was July, where he heard how stressed I was because we had 4 more team members than what we really should have had. And at that point, they weren't pulling their weight. And I was like, let me just grab the numbers. And he provided me with like a form, a sheet to look at the KPIs. And I started realizing, damn, these people are taking 2 weeks longer to do what they're supposed to be doing. I got a great solution for this. Let me just get them out of the business, because it just doesn't make sense for me to be hanging around dead weight.
No doubt. Awesome.
One of those things you got to do sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to do it, man. Like, so I'm not afraid to like say, okay, well, if this is not working out, I got to change. I got to pivot. Like, I'm a firm believer. You have to change your approach if something's not working.
What also like makes your sorry, I was just gonna say, it also makes your current team stronger too. Like, and like, you know, like you start to focus on the right people, giving them a lot more time, and they appreciate it a lot more too. So
100%. And I think, you know, again, there's a book called Traction by Gino Wickman, or any of his series of books. And he does a great job of like just being able to like identifying the cultural fit. Do they, you know, or do you have the right person in the right seat, and you know, implementing those things and then putting that into play, and then seeing the traction go from like August. Like from August, we had a great month still, right? Even though we let them go. September, we had like a 3 to 5% dip. And then October, we had our best month with half the size of the team. And I was looking at it, I'm like, well, let's keep the momentum going. Like, we got so many things that are working for us. Like, we just got to keep doubling down the things that are working at this point.
100%. Patrick, you were going to say something?
No, I agree. I mean, I think, you know, just going back to the niche conversation, this is something that we talk about in some of the circles that I'm in, and folks that I work with is, you know, listen, don't be the one to die on that hill if you're in a space that doesn't need you. That's dumb. I don't care what anybody on Facebook tells you or any of that about like, oh, you just got to commit and be all in and all that. Like, yeah, well, you can do that, but you're also going to be poor. So that's the decision you have to make. And so, yeah, things change. And depending on the industry, sometimes there are multiple things that impact that, you know, technology, regulation. I mean, and so those things are going to continue to evolve with or without you. It's up to you to, as you put it, you know, be forward thinking, keep an eye on adjacent industries that have synergies, or maybe nothing at all related to what you're currently doing, but an opportunity or risk that you feel comfortable taking that will translate into an opportunity. No doubt about it.
Yeah, no, you have to. If you know, I learned very early on in my first year, I was like, you know what, let's go just play salespeople. And then year 2, I was like, I made the mistake of going too wide too fast. Mm-hmm. And that mistake cost me a lot more time. And I said, okay, by the end of year 2, mind you, I was solely relying on my year 1, I was solely relying on my network. Year 2, that network, I pretty much at that point didn't have that many labs. So I said, let me start implementing lead generation channels, trial and error. It took me a whole year of figuring that shit out. And I was like, I'm so grateful that I went through that, because there was times where I said, man, I'm pretty sure this business is going to close down. And I prayed every single day for that not to happen. And I was like, man, God, if you let me get through this, I promise you, I'm going to make it work. I'm going to make it work. And hey, guess what happened? Like, in a worse months when I thought, okay, it's going to happen, SEO somehow magically trickles in a sale. Next, and that lasted, and that just kept happening and happening and happening. And I was like, okay, I need to start doubling down on these things that are working, because granted, I need it to work the way it's supposed to. And obviously the biggest component for some of these things is just time, right? And fixing the process or fixing the approach. And thankfully, I had a network that I could always go back to, who are, marketers, copywriters, that I could always, ask for their best advice, and they would be willing to give it to me with their best intentions. And I really appreciate those guys for everything they've shared with me, because if not, you kind of learn these things and you're like, okay, for me, it's kind of like, I don't want to be sharing all these things, because you know how the world is. Everybody tries to copy you, but at the same time, it's like, I then decided, you know what, let me create a community of people in my industry, not in my industry, but in recruiting, who we could just share synergies with. And that ended up happening. That's how we got connected with Vincent. That's how I'm here with you. And then, we added more people to the mix who are doing, amazingly well. And I'm picking their brains on how they are able to accomplish these higher numbers. And I'm like, man, that's incredible. But I think one caveat that I bring to the table that most don't see, it's like the tech savvy side of like how to optimize your recruitment business. Most of them just, again, I'm coming in from sales, understanding marketing, and then I'm looking, I'm like, this could be optimized so much better. And it's like, I was talking with this guy, he's in Germany. He has 20 offices. And when I was talking to him, how I'm doing everything I'm doing, he was like, he never thought about it that way. And I feel like that's the time for newcomers like us to come in and really share like how we could help optimize systems for companies. And that gets me excited, because that could be a completely different venture that I could potentially get into down the path, just because I'm already doing it right now in my current business.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think about that all the time too. Sometimes I'm like, man, companies I've worked for in the past, like if they were just doing half of this stuff on a larger scale with all the money they had, like, you know what I mean? Like it'd be crushing it. So like,
they would. That's why I'm looking to, when that time does come, to either offer that as a service or potentially buy them.
Interesting. So your acquisition within the recruiting space, just to continue to grow 100%. Your current core business? Yeah.
100%. It's so profitable. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Totally.
Once you have it running and if you have the right clienteles, and like say it's not the right management and team, you just get rid of them, clean it up, optimize it better. And it just makes things a lot smoother.
It's interesting that you bring that up. It's definitely something that I've also thought about as well, for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, I'm already in that business, so that is a natural thought. But also beyond that, one of the things in terms of an acquisition standpoint within recruiting is typically you don't get really awesome multiples usually, just depending on how the business is set up and book of business and SOPs and all of that good stuff. But you can get them at pretty decent bargain discounts, I think. That, and with baby boomers retiring, there's a flood of new businesses that are profitable but not attractive enough, not big enough for PE firms and VC and this sort of thing to come in and scoop them up. But for folks that have a little cash and know how to work an SBA program and that sort of thing, to come in and scoop them up significantly discounted. So that's an interesting thought.
1,000%. I've already been talking to an SBA lender, and I have good relationships with a couple of them already. So it's like, hey, it's a
layup.
It's a layup, but there's certain components to it, right? So like my business is in Miami, but if I want to buy a business that is theoretically another location based, it has to be within 4 hours, and 4 hours is stretching it. So I said, look, I was talking with my SBA lender and we were talking about it, and she was like, look, I could definitely, put the feelers out there, see what comes in, and I could go ahead and when that time does come, to see what other recruitment business wants to sell. And I said, perfect. And she was telling me, like, most recruitment businesses profit margins are like, I'm not exaggerating, it's like over 60%. I'm not going to say anything higher than that because people won't believe me. But mine is
higher than that personally. Right.
Agreed with you 100%. Mine is too. But I'm going to just leave it at 60 to leave it plain and simple. And she was telling me, you know what? Oh wow, Vincent did the Houdini.
I know, man.
We call that the Harry Potter. The Harry Potter. He just disappears into the brick wall. And no, 100%. So I've taken 2 SBA loans now to purchase FedEx routes over the last 2 years. And so familiar with that process. There are ways to establish residency, and workarounds and that sort of thing. But
I'm sure I already know what you're going to say. Just buy a location over there, put the mailbox there, and then
there's there's pretty cost effective ways to establish residency outside of your net there. But I mean, you can't beat the sweetheart deal. 10% down, 10-year fixed rate, 6-7%. Yeah, you can't beat it. To get into something cash flowing, $400,000-$500,000 a year is solid.
Yeah, to me, listen, and I'm glad that's working for you, because this whole thing to me started happening to me literally a few months ago when I started hanging out with my real estate investing buddies, and they're like, "Jay, stop thinking of the old way of trying to grow a business. Just buy a business. Like, just save up money, cash reserve, and then buy one, instead of you trying to do all this stuff, because it's not like it's not like you don't know how to do it already. You already know how to do it, but like, there's more ways of growing a business than just trying to scale it. You could actually buy it." So,
no doubt. I think I was telling Vince this. I think it was maybe when we were doing an intro or something. And he's like, "What other business have you started?" Like, well, I've only started the recruiting business, and I started a coaching program. But that's it. And I have no intentions of starting any other, like, everything that I do moving forward will be through acquisition, leveraging capital for sure.
And here's the thing about recruiting, which everybody here already knows: the amount of time it takes to build a brand, do the SEO, do all the things. It's so much groundwork that in order for it to actually pay off, right, is in case if you want to sell it, and that's when you sell it for what you want to sell it. But even if it doesn't sell, it can become very passive for you. But I agree with you. After I finish what I'm doing here in this project, my whole intentions from that point on will be to buy companies. I don't want to go through this process again, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of grunt work that that nobody sees for at least years. So it's like, once you get a little bit of recognition, you're like, finally.
No doubt.
Have you started kind of like looking into what are those things that you look for when you're looking to acquire a business? Like, I guess, what makes it really good to kind of be like, okay, this is the one that I want to take, So
it's a great question, because like, for me, as I'm learning this whole game, I'm really the most two things that I'm looking at is like the margins, right? Like the profits, the expenses. Like, I'm looking at how their sales and marketing is set up. I'm looking at their operationals, and I'm looking at their finance. And then obviously I'm working right now to learn more about every department. But as far as for sales and marketing, I'll find out if they're actually where they say they're at. And as far as for operations, I have a good grasp on that. So for me, I could always hire someone who's really good at finance to break down the books to make sure they're not fluffing it, because we all know the most dangerous thing that happens to a business when they want to sell is that they start fluffing up the books, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
all of a sudden SDE becomes a thing. Like, I don't care what my P&L says. I actually made, whatever.
Exactly. So it's just, you could find anybody that's well-educated that has a degree on this and just pay them by the hour to actually get that sorted out. But, when you're doing what you're doing, and you're trying to go out, and again, it's like being familiar with what you know. Like, for me, if I'm going to buy a recruitment business, I already know what to look for, right? Because I'm already doing it. And I think, Patrick, to your point, like, I commend you for going outside that and buying, that FedEx routes, because like, it's like a completely different, I don't know if you went through like the unknown scary parts of like, man, I don't know if this is actually going to pay off the way it's supposed to. In theory, it's supposed to, right? But
I hired a consultant before I did that. I had done a ton of personal research before getting super intentional with it. But yeah, one of the mistakes that I made early on when I launched my staffing and recruiting business is I didn't go that route and just powered through. And I have also got the battle scars to prove it. But getting into new ventures, I didn't make that mistake. And so, yeah, the learning curve and the tribal knowledge and all of that, without having lived it and breathed it, I leveraged capital to get that download and hit the ground running quickly. And then the other thing too, for me, it's about diversification. Obviously, recruiting has been great and continues to be profitable for me and my family. But, I'm always looking to diversify and get into other pockets of the economy that I think are going to be in growth mode for a long time to come. And so the combination for me is that needs to be present. And then also it needs to be realistic for me to continue to live the lifestyle that I am currently living. And it's not going to be a huge time suck. It's not going to be this massive lift that I personally have to do every week. And so the thing about the FedEx route, we talked about this on a podcast or two ago, but obviously it's a play on logistics, but it's also a backdoor play on e-commerce as well, which is what I really love. And so People are going to continue to, I believe that. I think people are going to probably continue to buy stuff online and have it delivered to them. And so, I found that really attractive. You can buy it with management in place already and run it, remotely, semi-absentee, if you will, just depending on, how mature the infrastructure is and the business itself, kind of to your point. It's a cash cow. They pay every Thursday. It's FedEx, which is great. And so, it checked all the boxes for me. I'm doing the same thing in real estate. It's obviously a different, kind of asset class, but long-term rentals primarily. I think it's important if you want to continue to grow your wealth, for sure.
100%. I look, for the most part, any business that I want to get into, it has to be recession proof. And recession proof is recruiting, coaching, and real estate. Recruiting, real estate, and coaching are the three that are always going to be in need. So you can't go wrong with any of those, especially like for me, I'm curious to know more about the FedEx route because we recruited heavily for logistics and they went through a freight recession. So I'm curious to know, like, for probably not for today, for another time, but like, how did, during those times, how did that go about?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, we talked about this the other day. So like the way I would describe the FedEx business, which actually aligns really, really well with what we already do in recruiting, is really what it is. It's obviously, like I said, a logistics business, but it's really a recruiting business with a side of logistics, because the two headaches in that space are the drivers and then the maintenance on the trucks. And so if you can dial that in completely so that you know where the landmines are and you don't step in any doo-doo and you're operating proactively and that sort of thing, it can be pretty seamless. The other thing too, I mean, one of the things so there's two different routes that you can get. One's called P&D, which means personal delivery. So those are the box trucks that you see flying around your neighborhood, dropping off Amazon boxes and this sort of thing. Those drivers don't require a CDL, which is a big difference. If you were doing long haul,
I used to be a trucker, so
so that's a major hoop that you don't have to jump through. There's some other things that you do because you are flying. One of the advantages of working with FedEx and being a contractor with them is you get to fly under their insurance policy. So all that liability lands on them. If you were to go and do that, like if you were to try to do an Amazon route, that's one of the big differences between Amazon and FedEx is Amazon makes you get your own policy. If you don't know this, in terms of underwriting, driving a vehicle commercially is one of the most dangerous jobs that you can have. And so obviously insurance becomes a thing and very expensive and that sort of thing. So that's a disadvantage working with Amazon comparatively to FedEx. But yeah,
it sounds like Amazon's losing a lot of customers, even on the e-com side, because a lot of them are shifting over to Shopify. Because I helped a buddy of mine ramp up his business in e-com, and they shifted everything from Amazon to Shopify.
Yeah,
because Amazon was like everything for the most part was like no safety nets for the businesses inside there. So it's like we're also seeing this change happen in that e-com side. So it's actually interesting to hear you say that there's like adjacent between like the recruiting and the and the logistics, because I feel the same thing about what we're doing with the recruiting business, and it kind of just taps in more into like feeling like, all right, I'm doing the right thing if you're saying that, because it's one of those things where you're like, I know it's a need in the market, I know it's going to be profitable, but is it going to take away my time from my main business? And for the most part, we don't necessarily see it that way. So I'm glad to see that. So everything's panning out for you.
Totally.
I think it's Grant Cardone talks about that sometimes. He's like your second flow of income or your second business should be somewhat of a stem of your first one. Like it should be a complete shift where it's like almost entirely different. So that makes a lot of sense. Patrick, with the staffing side of things on the FedEx business. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know if you want to. I know we're coming up on like 3 minutes left. So do you want to kind of like wrap it up, or do you want to ask one more?
No, go ahead. I'm good with, but yeah, I do have a hard stop here in about 3 minutes. So,
cool. Nothing specific. I don't know, Jayce. Any advice that you have for newer entrepreneurs kind of just getting into things, other than kind of like what we mentioned, honestly, just so far should be exciting to anybody, because it's like, as you're going through those difficult times, you have to know that those are going to benefit you later on when you're looking to buy businesses, because now you know what to look out for, what to not look out for. So hopefully, a lot of that was exciting. But any advice that you would have for maybe newer entrepreneurs or anybody kind of getting into any industry, but especially starting maybe recruiting in general?
Yeah, it's just don't hide behind the computer.
Like, what do you mean by that?
just go out there and network, man. Like, just go ahead, shake hands, kiss babies, give some autographs, like, get out there. Again, most of my business, even though we do all these great things, like we do get, anytime we go to an event with my team and we become intentional, we at least make anywhere between 50 to 100,000 from that event alone, from that month. So just stop hiding behind a camera, stop hiding behind a computer screen, like just get out there, network, and just be intentional. Like, set the intentions.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Love that. Cool. Well,
Jayce, brother, good to meet you, man. Enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah,
man.
Too, man.
Thank you so much for jumping on with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, guys. It was a pleasure being on here. Definitely look forward to seeing the recording on this. And again, thanks for having me.
We'll have you back sometime, man.
Say that again.
I said we can, and we'd love to have you back sometime again. So.
Yeah, let's maybe do it after this Q4. Let's see what happens. Let's see if my theory is actually spot on about what I mentioned about the SEO. So I'm curious to see how that pans out.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay, gang.
Thanks.
Take
guys.
care.
Take care.